There was one story about a very typical ending for Dwarf Fortress, this demon invasion, right? Where the demons charged into the fortress from the bottom because you dig too deep, right? That's what dwarves do, dig too deep, delve too greedily or whatever. And the demons pour into the fortress. There was a battle on a bridge, and the last dwarf that I'm kind of like conflating different details and so forth because, you know, it's not that important. But the last dwarf killed one of the sort of main named demons that was causing trouble in the fortress, but at the time fell off the bridge, landed, you know, quite a long way down, broke his leg, and was sitting there waiting to starve to death. Last dwarf in the fortress, demons couldn't get to him or didn't know he was there. And so the player, of course, we're leaving the player out of this, the player who had been ordering these attacks and trying to save their fortress, has this dwarf now sitting at the bottom of this chasm, having had this giant invasion, and is just watching the demons kind of go around, wreck their furniture, and there's no dwarves left. And so they decided, you know, how are we going to cap off this fortress? And they said, let's engrave the wall. Let's order this dwarf, let's change their job to be an engraver, and let's have him engrave the wall with some final engraving. And the dwarf sat there and started engraving on the wall and made a mural of them killing the demon that they killed before they fell over. You can kind of put that together then. It's okay, this is their last act of defiance and memory for this fortress, right? But the thing is, that had like a 30% chance to just be a piece of cheese or something. So it's like the stories that resonate with people are going to be the ones we hear about, and then there's the other stories. But you could have, I mean, maybe you'd have a great interpretation for that too, because they wouldn't engrave cheese if they didn't like cheese. And so maybe the person's just making like this last memory. I mean, as long as the mechanical systems we put in line up to some degree with how people think of things, it's sort of this verisimilitude question, then the stories will hold together. And the more stuff we add, the deeper it all seems in part and is in part. The whole thing that we've done is just put a lot of crap in the game. Whether that's mechanical systems or stuff, right? We have, I don't know how many dozens of vegetables, and no, the cheese isn't just cheese, of course. There are a variety of milks in the game. I think there are even cheeses that are not real cheeses. Like, I don't know if you can, like pig's milk, I guess they don't leave, it's really thick or something. I don't know much about it, so I don't hear about pig cheese. I'm not sure you hear about pig cheese much. Don't know anything about pig cheese. We got it. I'm sure we have cheese from jaguars too, right? If you ever decide to milk one, good luck with that. When the item cheese was added, we needed to go into the dwarves and give them preferences, like different food items, because it's important for them to eat the foods that they like. And it's almost a gamey aspect of the game still, is kind of like keep your dwarves happy type of thing. So if dwarves can like cheese, and then that becomes a possible engraving subject for them, and they have different ways of like putting themselves in the engraving with little cheeses all around them and they're smiling, or they have just a cheese. And they can do the same with mushrooms and alcohol and all the other things that they like, or the things that they're terrified of. I mean, that chasm dwarf could easily have put like a picture of them being scared of a rat because they were scared of rats, and then that would have, I mean, I guess you could try and come up with a justification, and people would have tried to come up with a justification for how that related to the demon invasion, and that's fine. I mean, that's part of the game. So they have to navigate the interface. This is a difficult thing because the interface is terrible. They would need to use the look command, go over to the engraving, which, because they ordered the engraving, is presumably something they'd actually be interested in doing. They use the look command, go over, drag or move the cursor over to the engraving, press enter, and up pops a paragraph describing it. There's no graphics, but there's a paragraph description that will say, you know, on the wall there is an image of a dwarf surrounded by cheese. The dwarf is smiling, and then it would be in text. The amount of detail is varied. I mean, in the example we gave here with the engraving on the wall, if you engrave an image on a wall, it doesn't currently care what that wall is made out of, other than the fact that it's a kind of stone. So if it were sand, you can't put an engraving. If it were just some kind of mud or tree roots, you wouldn't be able to engrave it. But if it's something like talc or something like that, like some sort of stone where the engraver would more or less be wasting their time and wouldn't be able to put a lot of detail into it. The game nevertheless says, oh, this is a masterpiece engraving, if the dwarf is in fact good enough to produce such a thing. And so there are elements that are missing to the detail and things that you add over time. Obviously, the way I'm talking about this, I'd really like for it to care about the material, right, that they use, and for them to be proficient. Like maybe there's soapstone carvers that really do like to carve on things like that and do a good job of it, whereas there are other people that would be using specialized tools to make engravings on fantasy stones that are generated by the game. So it's a matter of degrees, and the amount of detail is varied. Ideally, I guess the player doesn't see which degrees have been selected and which ones haven't, right? I mean, you hope that they give you the benefit of the doubt every time, at least while they're just kind of enjoying themselves. We also like people to like figure out how things work. I mean, it's great if they understand that there are certain limitations. And, you know, in some cases, it's really overblown, like titles of books. Right now, the title of a book can be something like, you know, why have weather systems failed us, or something like that. Whereas that's a book about weather systems, which is one of the kind of many, you know, hundreds of knowledge pieces that the scholars can discover. It doesn't really have any impact on the game when they discover it, but they can discover kind of how the water cycle works or something like that. But that book title implies a lot more about their feeling about weather systems and the current state of weather systems as it relates to the Dwarven's civilization and that kind of thing. But it just comes from a list of a couple hundred random book titles that is plugging nouns into, basically like Mad Libs or something, right? And that's kind of, for us, the first stage of random generation. There's the stage where you're just putting in some flavor text and people can read a lot out of it, but it's just there as kind of a first, like I'm putting this tack in my map or whatever, saying we're going to get to this sometime. And then the next stage would be to have some mechanical connections. You already do see some mechanical connections there just because the content of the book is tied into the title of the book. That is a mechanical connection. It would be better if the thoughts of the author on the subject matter were reflected, or something more about the subject matter were reflected. And then you can take that further and further, right? And all of our simulations are like that. Everything is taken in degrees, just by feel. I guess that's part of the art of it, I suppose. I mean, as much as art is intersecting just running out of time, this is you know, kind of one of the things that we try to be sort of thoughtful about.
So the reason that it takes a long time is because it is really, really complex, and it's with all these simulations going on. If we try to add one little thing, we have to change everything about the game. Things that would naturally, you'd think this is how this works, we have to program that in. And so we have to be really, we have to be really complete when we're adding sections of the game. So that's why it takes so long. It's like there's pieces of the game that were written in 2006 that haven't changed.